Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to featuringcode.com. In today's video we're gonna take a look on my favorite error in Angular, which is called expression has changed after it was checked. I've created a little demo project for this let's call it tutorial, which is something pretty basic. We have a parent, a child, and later we'll see another child and a grandchild. As you see, when we reload this app, everything works very good and we have no errors. First, let's see something about Angular and how data flows in Angular, because this is one of the main reasons, yes, why this error appears. If we go to the glossary here, we're gonna see something called unidirectional data flow, and to save you some time from reading, this expression change after it has been checked error applies whenever a child changes a property in the parent while change detection is in place. So the way data flows in Angular is that it's getting passed from top to bottom, so from the parent to the children. And whenever a child component changes some data in the parent, we're gonna see this error. And let's get to it. Let's start triggering these exceptions. So we have this parent component. It has isLoading, which is an observable that is listening to a service. We're not going to use this right now. It has a text property and some methods here. Change props, which this changes the text, and a toggle child. This is just to show the ng-on-destroy method. The thing is, in the latest versions of Angular, in whatever lifecycle hook you change some data on the parent from a child, you're gonna trigger this error. So let's look a bit on the template. So we have this app child, which has a change parent listener, which in turn calls the change props from the parent. So practically it changes the text. It defaults to some other text. If we go in the child component, we're gonna see some lifecycle hooks here, and we're gonna start with ng-on-init, which it's so on init it triggers a change, ng-on-init, and this triggered change emits this change parent emitter. Okay, change parent props. Another thing, the changing that is triggering these errors, so the properties that you change need to be used in the template. This is very important. So for example, this child component on init, it triggers the change. Yes, it emits to the parent. The parent is listening and it changes this text. And if we look In the, let me take this out of here. If we look in the console, we're gonna see that when we refresh, parent this text is some other text, but we don't have the text here in the page because it's commented out from the template. But if we uncomment this and hit save, look what we got here, our favorite error. This error can happen if you trigger some changes from the child on init, but it also happens if you trigger the change on ng do check. You see we have the error, some other text, same here. If we trigger the error on ng after view checked, see we have the error. After content init, we have the error. And even in ng on destroy, that's why we have the toggle, so on refresh nothing happens, but when I will toggle the child, just a second, oh yeah, and when I toggle the child, we have the error. Another way to trigger this error is, for example, if you're using a service that is shared throughout the application. So I have this loader service, which is here. It's just a subject that changes this is a loading property, and in the parent component we have this is loading observable. In the template I'll have this app other child, which is listening. Look, the error already appeared. Other child worked. Oh yeah, this is an error because in this other child I was doing some other changes on ng on changes, which is another lifecycle hook. Let me comment this. I was changing directly the text in the parent. But we have this other child that is showing a loading if the application is loading. So right now, since the is loading is false, as you see here, is loading. So is loading in the service is primarily set to false. Nothing happens. But if I go in my child component, let me uncomment this grandchild, and this grandchild on init triggers a set loading true on the same service. So from whatever component you have in the app, if you trigger while the change detection is working a change in properties on the parent, because is loading is a parent property that is listening to the loader service is loading, we're gonna see that we have this error. Previous value was false, current value is true. And this of course happens because we are using the value in the template. Right now I commented this other child, nothing shows. Uncomment, and we have the error. An error that was triggered through a grandchild component from the app, but you can trigger it from whatever children component that you have. Okay, so how do we fix this error? How can we change data in the parent without having this error? Let me comment this, and let's go to the child component. One of the ways to do this is, for example, if you need to make an HTTP call in onInit, you can create the whole ng onInit as async. This way, ng onInit will become asynchronous, and the trigger change will occur after the whole property bindings and updating of the data has happened. So if we go in the application and refresh, we'll see that we have some other text which is changed, which is different than some text that was originally here. So we have this without an error. Another more ugly way is to use a set timeout. This again takes the trigger change. Set timeout is asynchronous. It takes the trigger change out of the call stack and executes it after the whole other Angular code was executed. This is happening because something called the event loop. Maybe I'll do a video on this also, although you find a lot of useful videos on the subject on YouTube already. Okay, so we have this in a set timeout. Same thing, no error. Great. Another way, let's we need the ng onInit, is to move logic from the parent to another component. So in our case, we have this app other child. Imagine this would be a loader component that you need to show in your application whenever some loading is happening. So you have a spinner. You don't need to keep this data in the parent and then pass it down to the component. You can move this data directly in the child, in the other component. Let's see here. Quick fix. Let's declare here. What? Nah. Come on. Okay, and import this also from RxJS. Great. And in the parent component we have an error because I'm passing this is loading, which is no longer used. Let's take this. Let's delete this since we don't need it, so no errors now, and move it here. Great. And now we will see this loading because without the error. So this loading shows whenever is loading is true, and this is happening because in the grandchild we're setting it to true here, and because this is happening we're seeing this loading without the error. So that's about it about with this video. I also wrote a blog post if you want to read it. There was another article about everything you need to know about this error, which is this article, but things are a bit changed right now. We're using Angular 13 and this doesn't apply. So for example, what doesn't apply is this. This parent name and everything works, is okay. Right now if you do this, if you change the parent property, so as it was here in the other child component, so I'm passing the parent like in this tutorial. Whenever you change right now, yeah, and let's see the text, and let's see if this is, oh yeah, this another thing, this is not working right now because ng on changes is called after if the component has inputs on it. So ng on changes, ng on. And note that if your component has no inputs or you use it without providing any inputs, it will not call the ng on changes. And this is what's happening right now. This component doesn't have an input anymore. It doesn't have an input on it, but let's put, let's see if we put here, is just okay, and now it calls the ng on changes. We're gonna see other service to true, other child ng on changes, so it's called here. So yeah, whenever you call this, so let's put it, let's console log here and let's go to the child component. So for example, in the ng on it, the same example, you're gonna see that some text and the value is oppa. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and see you next time. Bye.